Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. We are in the midst of another snow day here at Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters. No real reason for it. There was snow yesterday, of course, and our streets are clear. But, well, it's just another one of those things. We have one of those wacky counties that has a distant rural part that I guess they either don't plow or they have to wait for the sheep to eat the snow. I'm not exactly certain how this whole thing works. I'm an Eastern elite, as you know, so I couldn't tell you. It actually is very difficult to keep those narrow, rural, shaded streets running through the hollows, or the hollers, I guess we could say, clear, clean, ice-free, etc. And so they're very often, very often the kids are the beneficiaries of living the more easterly suburban lifestyle. Schools closed all over the county. And it doesn't matter whether your streets are clear or not. It matters whether the least clearable streets in the county have been cleared. So good for them. Maybe a little noise in the background, a little less than, as Scott put it, the bustling diner sound effects that we had going on in the background today. A little quieter, a little more subdued as the kids realize they're probably going back to school tomorrow. But then it's spring break after that. And we'll have to talk about the scheduling of spring break. Not as free to record new programs as I have been during breaks in the past, as it's time to start visiting colleges with the kids, which is probably a fine opportunity to remind you all that, of course, the operation of the program largely depends on your generosity and donations through Patreon, Patreon. Patreon.com/KagroX is where you can find my donations page. Of course, we are equipped to accept and process your donations through Square Cash. You'll find all of our links for that beneath each embedded show, each embedded player of our podcast over at Daily Coast. But Square Cash, Patreon, our main intake routes. Of course, if you absolutely need it, we do have an extra special setup through PayPal, which we can allow you to use either for one-time donations or recurring monthly donations. That's the key advantage, I think, over at Patreon. They make it pretty easy. But if PayPal is your thing, then we absolutely can do it. Because next year, we'll still have two of them around to make noise during days off for school. But after that, I have to pay somebody else for the privilege of listening to his morning time noise. Don't worry about it, though. Any of you colleges out there in America who are not early risers, it's not likely he'll be making any noise before noon over at your place. But all that has to be paid for. And, well, you know, it's going to be tight. So I'll put that out there. This is a living, or it could be, if we had everybody's participation. And certainly I could also help, say, Scott Anderson, perhaps one day be able to do the same for his kids. At this point, it's just a sick joke, of course, to tease him with that at this level. But hey, that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss the world in which super rich mega donors control everything. And the rest of us just sort of hang around and watch what's going to happen and watch the Donald Trump reality show presidency. Haha, so sick of that joke already. But lots to catch up on today. Today being Thursday, we will have Greg Dworkin here with us. And I guess I'll just preface everything by saying, so Monday and Tuesday we'll be doing some college visits. That should be fun. And I can't do a show during the college visit. I don't think we would be able to, I don't know what my opportunities are going to be to get a show pre-recorded, let alone two of them. So we may have to go to the reruns. We do have actually by now more than a year's worth of Trump era reruns. I don't know whether it's better to go back in time and be nostalgic and listen to shows from the Obama era, or whether that too would be something of a sick joke at this point. we'll have to figure it out. And then, of course, the Easter weekend is coming up as well, and we'll be making a visit. That's a little further out. Might be able to swing a show or at least a recorded one for the Monday following the Easter holiday. But we'll get to that when we'll cross that bridge when it rots in place and falls into the sea and we start another infrastructure week. How about that? Okay. Oh, do I have any plans for when Muller is fired? Asks the Warlock. I don't. And I guess I should do one of those things where they have pre-written obituaries in the editorial offices at major newspapers in case somebody who is prominent and aged finally passes away, and then they can be instantly ready. Some of you probably wondered, how did they come out with those glowing obituaries so quickly? Many more of you likely have figured it out by now, but that is actually true. They really do write those obituaries very often in advance, and it's only when you're caught by surprise by somebody's untimely death that they really have to scramble. I should have a show recorded for the firing of Mueller, but who knows what kind of, I don't even, there's no guessing what the situation was going to be at that point, who's going to still be in government, who may or may not still be alive at that point. I don't know. My plans, if he is fired Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to announce this now. Donald, if you're listening, you can probably take care of that over the weekend or Monday or Tuesday. Tuesday, if you do it Tuesday evening, we'll be back on the air Wednesday. So Monday is kind of in the sweet spot. Maybe this weekend is the right time. If he were, that would be a real tragedy for us. He would fire Mueller and we'd be off the air. And there'd really be very little we could do about that. We could bring Greg Dworkin on and just leave the phone line open, I suppose, and then you'll hear nothing for a long time, and then Greg can come on and just say, hello, is this thing on? Mueller's been fired, and I have to take over the show. That's an option. I don't know if it's going to work out for you.
The problem is you have to game out not just that Mueller was fired, but who fired him.
That's true, too. I don't know who will be around to do it.
Would you do a show say, well, after going through a number of people who were hired and then fired for not doing his will,
yes,
Attorney General Betsy DeVos was the one who actually fired
that might be
Rod Rosenstein and thereby enabling the firing of Robert Mueller.
Choose your own adventure, like that video game Dragon's Lair, that first that video laser disc game that I'll have to tape 6 or 7 different shows and mix them together remotely as we go. I don't know how I would guess who gets to do that. Yeah, it'll be very.
The ghost of Robert Bork was hired to. You don't know. I mean, you could do a Watergate show, because at least we know that.
Right, that's true. And we could say it's a rerun, but it's a very old show. I was, 2, so
so it's just hard to guess. So there was a lot going on.
Yes, some of it is in the news.
Some of it's in the news. There's some new polling out today, which I think is well worth discussing. Let's do some gun stuff, and then let's do some political stuff.
All right. I read about those two things.
All right. The gun stuff I actually have in the lineup for you. The other stuff, I think I'll just do it as I go along because I didn't really prepare properly the list of things I was going to cover for you because I didn't give them to you.
Okay. Well, I didn't read anything, so I guess we're in the same boat.
We're even. That's
I don't even know how I got in this boat.
So you didn't hear anything. I mean, that's really how it goes. It's an old Groucho Marx line. But why didn't you say anything? Well, that's why I didn't hear anything. So Armando has an observation, by the way.
Yeah.
Another way to fire Mueller and get Jeff Sessions to undo the special counsel regulation that Justice enacted. But that's complicated. That would be like understanding the rules and actually doing work. I just think they would do it the lazy way. They would just keep firing and hiring people till they found somebody who would do their bidding. They could do Mick Mulvaney because, he's got every other job in government. Why doesn't he just do that job too?
There's no reason he couldn't. In fact, he should be the special counsel.
Yeah, so he could fire himself. That would be, the most efficient way to do it. There's a new USA Today Ipsos poll out today. The threat of mass shootings is the defining fear for the generation that's grown up in the shadow of Columbine. And the USA Today Ipsos poll finds now more than 1 in 3 young people nationwide say they plan to join the March for Our Lives protest on Saturday in person or via social media. The survey of 13 to 24-year-olds, including more than 600 middle school and high school students, shows both the depth of anxiety that school violence has fueled and the way a movement that spread across the country in the weeks since the rampage at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, left 17 people dead.
Yes.
And then on Tuesday, another school shooting in Great Mills, Maryland, left the alleged shooter dead and 2 other students wounded. Now, I had never heard of the community of Great Mills, Maryland. I'm familiar with Owings Mills, Maryland, because of a PBS show with Louis Rukeyser about the stock market, because it was always like where he was from. So I don't know anything about Maryland. So I guess a lot of small towns are named Mills.
Apparently, yeah. Well, this one is far removed from the greater Washington, D.C. area. St. Mary's County is sort of south end of the eastern shore, and they don't get over this way, and we don't get there, unless you're going to the beach.
18% of the young people polled, including 21% of those 13 to 17, say they'll participate personally in the marches. If they do, it would mean the most massive student-led protests in American history, dwarfing even the anti-war demonstrations of the Vietnam era. Another 24% say they'll participate using social media. So I like that. It's about time us boomers, we boomers, got put into the no, you're second now, not first. And that would be great. So I'm looking forward to that. And interestingly, there was also coincidentally a poll this morning in Massachusetts alone, WBUR Poll, which as a pollster, Steve Kozala, posted this morning. And that is that as students plan another march, WBUR Poll finds widespread support throughout Massachusetts. 73% support student protests and 22% oppose. 5% don't know. So the idea that the students really are galvanizing this is true, and the idea that it's popular and actually support is growing is also true. And that's all important because, by the way, there's this omnibus thing that language of which came out yesterday.
Yes.
And there's gun stuff in it, so that's worth pursuing as well.
Yeah.
As it happens, and here, let's just do this story. This one is from ABC. That means I'll have to turn off the video. Spending bill will stipulate that CDC can study gun violence. And that's one of the things that we've been pushing since Newtown and the United Physicians of Newtown got together and said that was like our key tenet there is that CDC has to be able to do that research.
Yeah.
So it says the omnibus spending bill currently making its way through Congress will stipulate that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention can study gun violence. Democratic and Republican sources confirm. Research the agency has steered clear of since the so-called Dickey Amendment was passed in 1996. Now, Jay Dickey has since passed away. Named for Republican Representative Jay Dickey of Arkansas, a self-proclaimed point man for the NRA on the Hill who later regretted his role in crafting the legislation, the Dickey Amendment does not explicitly ban CDC research on gun violence, but employees were so concerned about risking funding, almost all dodged the issue and haven't allocated money to it since. So that's one of the things that they'll do. Another thing that's in the bill is an interesting, there's the fixed NICS background checks part of it.
Okay.
Although I'm not totally sure that that's in there because everybody's still studying the language.
Yes, difficult to know.
Not in there is raising the minimum rifle purchase age or banning assault-style weapons.
Okay.
And then there's also language about a school violence prevention program, which initially was sponsored by Sandy Hook Promise from Newtown, about identifying at-risk kids in school. And so it'll be interesting to see how all of that stuff shakes out. It's progress.
Did you say the
it's not exactly where we want to be, but it's progress.
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes, and by the way, a geographical note. Great Mills is not all the way over on the eastern shore side of the Chesapeake. It's in that southern neck in between. But as I was saying, it's a little bit further outside of the greater D.C. area. It's a good hour and a half south. But I suppose you could consider it exurban, but not eastern shore. There.
All right. So turning from the gun polls and the omnibus, although that'll be interesting in and of itself in terms of how that goes.
Yes.
There's also some different polling. And this was put together by political scientist G. Elliott Morris. It's PPP polling, but he happened to summarize it in a tweet, which I'm sending over to you. And these are interesting. These are Democratic margins in Senate battlegrounds.
Okay.
Pennsylvania, not really a battleground. Casey, the Democrat incumbent, is 18 points over Barletta, the Republican. So that seems like pretty safe Senate seat for the Democrats, and I don't think anybody was really worried about that.
One of the safest battles around, I guess.
Okay. Wisconsin was touted as a battleground, not according to this poll. Baldwin, Tammy Baldwin, Democrat 51, Vukmir, Republican 39. That's 12-point lead. The last three, though, are the ones that I found the most interesting.
Okay.
Tennessee. Want to guess, or did you peek already?
I did not yet peek. I have yet to peek.
So Tennessee,
yes, I'll start peeking.
Democrat 46 and Marsha Blackburn, Republican 41.
Oh,
that's a 5-point lead for the Democrat.
All right, open seats are wacky.
Nevada, Rosen, the Democrat 44, Heller, the Republican 39, also a 5-point lead.
Not an open seat.
Arizona, Sinema. 46, the Democrat, 5-point lead over McSally, the Republican, 46-41.
Okay, these are good.
So these are all good. I mean, none of them are guarantees of win.
No.
But right now, the Democrats are actually in a reasonable position to not get clobbered in the Senate.
Yeah, well, that would be great.
Donnelly, Manchin, McCaskill, Heidi Heitkamp. There's people up for re-election.
Yeah.
That in theory could be difficult for Democrats. It's a difficult Democratic map. I'm not saying that they're taking the Senate. I'm not even sure that they'll hold their own, but it doesn't look like they're going to get clobbered based on this, with a lot of time to go between now and then.
And that has been the prediction for several years. People have been looking at 2018 and just saying the map is awful. The president for that party was worse. The map was terrible for Democrats, and the president was terrible for Republicans.
Right. Meanwhile, in a separate bill from the omnibus, and this is from Axios, this is sort of interesting too, given, Jones covered this in detail. I don't know if she covered it yesterday, but it's the ACA fix.
Yes.
And where it stands and how it's not really going anywhere.
Okay.
Did she cover that?
It was mentioned.
This is how the Senate's bipartisan ACA effort went off the rails. 6 months ago, Senate had a bipartisan health deal with a good chance of becoming law, but now the deal appears to be dead, derailed by abortion politics, party disagreement, and months of lawmakers dragging their feet while the healthcare landscape shifted.
Okay.
Axios does, vox-splainers always when they have these pieces.
Yes, why it matters.
They tell you the story, then they tell you why it matters.
Right.
And then they talk about what's going on. Which
what is
can
happening?
Be interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Why does it matter? Because premiums are almost certainly going up in October. Insurers will be deciding whether to keep participating in the marketplace, they write. And that means that if your insurance rates and premiums are going up in October and you vote in November,
yes,
who are you going to blame?
I will blame, Halloween.
The party in power?
Yes. I would.
So, this is a discussion about Senator Lamar Alexander and Patty Murray. Okay. They began trying to reach a deal in September to stabilize the Affordable Care Act's insurance markets and reached one in October. This is now March. That's a long time ago. Since then, congressional Republicans repealed the individual mandate. Trump administration released new regs that further chipped away at the law. These changes altered both the political and policy framework and paved the way for its ultimate failure. What went wrong? Abortions. The main tenet of the bipartisan ACA bill has always been to restore funding for the ACA's cost-sharing reduction. After the original deal was struck, Republicans wanted to add new language to prohibit insurance plans that receive these payments from offering abortion coverage. That means all plans. That means plans that had never been restricted under the Hyde Amendment in the past would be restricted now. And Democrats didn't want to do that.
I can understand why. It makes
no
sense.
But that's what you're going to hear. Republicans are going to complain. They are tanking the bill because they won't go along with the Hyde Amendment, which everybody knows we always do. What's the big deal? It's a non-issue. They just want rates to go up in October. That's going to be their line. And it is already their line.
Okay.
But that's not exactly what's happening here, just so your listeners know.
I gotcha. Yeah. Well, the Hyde Amendment, odious as it is, has always gone through. Why would that be the sticking point now? Because, I don't know, we're on television and we say so. Right.
Now, there's other parts of it, short-term plans. Democrats wanted to block the Trump administration's expansion of short-term health plans that don't comply with the ACA, in other words, junk insurance.
Yeah.
Republicans couldn't do that, but included new disclosure requirements for those plans and affirmed states' rights to regulate them. Democrats say including this codifies the new rule, in other words, allowing junk plans. Okay. Now, the insurance industry says this is a pointless argument. If the next administration repeals the short-term rule, the products would still exist, and under this legislation would still have to offer disclosures. Well, that's not the point. We're not arguing about whether they have disclosures. We're arguing about whether they exist and can be offered.
Yes.
So the insurance companies want it because they want to be able to, have you buy stuff. If you don't buy that other thing over there, at least buy this.
Right.
So this is regulating what's sold rather, from the insurance point of view, which they don't like. And the Democratic point of view on this has always been what we're trying to do is make sure people actually get reasonable coverage. So regulating what's sold isn't a matter of you're allowed this, but you're not allowed that because we just have some arbitrary reason for doing that. We're doing it because there's a minimum standard that we've established, essential health benefits that everybody has to meet so that when you get insurance, you're actually covered. And the insurance companies say, well, that's interfering with our market.
It's funny because it's not. I mean, if you consider insurance companies to be in the business of insuring people, it's not interfering with their market
right,
at all.
Right, but it is if you consider that all they want to do is sell you stuff whether it works or not, then yeah, it is.
Well, then that is a big market.
Well, that's a big difference, too. So that's one of the reasons why that's a holdup. It's just fascinating that the insurance companies say, this is a pointless dispute.
Yes, okay.
Well, actually, it's an extremely pointed dispute.
And it's worth a lot of money. The insurance market and the 1- insurance market.
And then the last thing is reinsurance. The desire to include reinsurance funding in the package has only become more bipartisan since the fall with House Republicans coming on board, but disputes over its structure became a problem. Democrats complain. The latest proposal allowed HHS secretary to decide how reinsurance funds would be allocated. And in other words, blue states don't get any.
Yeah. Who is the HHS secretary now? I've forgotten already.
Azar.
Right. Okay.
Who's actually a decent fellow compared to some of the other people they have in that cabinet. But that's pretty much the same as the ACA's previous reinsurance program, experts in a GOP aide said. I'd say both bills give a lot of discretion to the secretary, says Larry Levitt, neutral Kaiser Family Foundation person. So, I mean, that one, the reinsurance part could probably be, adjudicated. The problem there is that if you leave it up to the discretion of the secretary, you're leaving it up to the discretion of the president. And in this environment, Democrats aren't keen on that.
Yes.
So, but those are not nearly as big as the abortion question and the Hyde Amendment stuff. And basically, if you really want to fix this problem, you're going to have to vote out a lot of Republicans and get a Democratic Congress.
I am okay with that as a solution.
Yeah, I am too. But I just thought I'd, give you a summary of where we're at with that.
All right. Wow. Boy, they really have found, this would just be another story of Republicans essentially abandoning all principles that they claim to hold about government control of you and your dollars.
But it is a highlight of something else, which I think is important, which is to say they are completely and totally beholden to their evangelical base.
Which is amazing that their evangelical base is sticking around for the guy with the let's say, the legal troubles that he currently
Because this
has
is what they
embroiled in.
want. They could care less about Trump.
I
He's
did
just
not
a
know that
vehicle
they
to
were
get
so
them
interested
bits.
in taxes and, well, I mean, abortion was clearly an issue for them, but
We say that, Trump is unfit. Trump is actually, increasing the threat of nuclear war. Trump is stealing left and right from the government. Trump is encouraging nepotism, not just in him, but in all his cabinet people. Trump is lowering the standard about what it means to be, in position of power. He's doing all of those things and more. And they say, yeah, but you don't understand. He's the vehicle to get this abortion bill signed.
yeah.
That's all he is. And why do you think we're unhappy with that?
I don't.
And we say, well, there's
crazy.
a lot of other things going on in the world, including nuclear war and war in Syria and, you name the American economy, tariff wars. There's a lot more important things going on besides just abortion. And they say, well, no.
Right. That's what you think. It's a very convenient combination of platform tenets for them to be, one, anti-abortion, and two, not to act, to not claim anyway, to not actually care whether the rest of the world continues to exist. They're happy to actually have Armageddon once they got the bill signed. Although, honestly, I would say, you know what, leave the bill where it is. Don't sign it. Armageddon's coming. So, but it doesn't seem to work for them.
All right.
It's
So the
strange
break
and
is coming up, and on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook just a little bit.
Oh, okay. I know that guy. He's, I guess, trying to work these issues out for us, or maybe just for him. I'm not really sure.
Well, I got a good article on that, which I'm going to
okay.
give you, which I think takes a very neutral look at that and tries to give us an idea of what's going on.
All right. Well, I will. We'll wait for the other side of the break for that one. I did see Jen Hayden observing the other day that maybe the weirdest, creepiest part of this whole situation with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, et cetera, is that, well, first, of course, Zuckerberg denied that it ever could have happened. And then once he came to the realization that it did happen and Facebook was integral to the plan, he started to sort of low-key run for president himself. A little weird. We'll talk about that, too, after the break. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show. You're on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us, all the way from snowy Connecticut. Oh, how did you make out with the snow, by the way?
I had 3 inches. It's terrible.
Oh,
I
that's
had to have
a
a front loader come in and just move that stuff.
Yeah, we had a bit more than that, but not that bad, really.
We were expecting 15 to 18 inches. We got 3.
Yes. Well, I guess that's good. You got a nice one last look at a white winter coating, but you didn't really have to deal with it. It's
spring, my man. We shouldn't be doing this,
Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, technically speaking, but we're usually done with snow by now here anyway. It's probably the latest I've seen it.
It's been known to snow in May in Connecticut, so we're not over it yet. But,
Okay.
hopefully this will be the last of it. We'll see.
All right.
So I wanted to talk about Mark Zuckerberg, the real Mark.
Okay, I'm allowed. I'll allow it. Let's say.
There's a tweet from Frank Schaeffer, and it's entitled, Frank Schaeffer is an author, and he tweeted this, "Meet the real Mark Zuckerberg," and this is from a 2010 New Yorker profile. A 2010 New Yorker profile of Zuckerberg will haunt him. It details a leaked exchange between Z and a friend who wasn't identified. Zuckerberg is bragging about having access to the private data of any Harvard students. Zuckerberg mocks them. Yeah, so if you ever need information about anyone at Harvard, just ask, Zuckerberg said. I have 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, and SNS. The friend sounded surprised and said, "What? How'd you manage that?" And Zuckerberg said, "People just submitted. I don't know why. They trust me, the dumb Fs."
Yeah. Okay.
Congratulations. That is the real Mark Zuckerberg. That kind of attitude will make you rich, my friend. That kind of attitude will make you rich.
Yes. Well, it will. That is true. And, but it does reinforce what I've always thought here, we meaning me, that he went into this thing with just the expectation of, look, I just want to be able to look at pictures of the girls at Harvard and contact any one of them that I want. And it accidentally grew into something much bigger. But yeah, it was always about, I don't know why people give me this stuff.
I don't know, but if they want to make me the richest person on the planet, or somewhere close to it, I'm okay with that.
Right. All you have to do is
who am I to
sign
say
up
no?
here.
Who am I to say no?
Yeah, right. I don't know. Well, you couldn't if you wanted to. People want to throw their information at you in exchange for being able to look at pictures of all the girls at school.
So Zuckerberg actually surfaced yesterday and made a statement about how Facebook is going to approach this Cambridge Analytica thing. And this is a piece from Mashable, which I thought in their tech section, I thought was actually pretty good. Mark Zuckerberg's response to the Cambridge Analytica controversy is a big deal. Says Carissa Bell, who is their tech writer.
All right.
Facebook says it'll restrict the data that developers can access if the app hasn't been vetted. Even if an app has been vetted, it will no longer be able to access users' data if they haven't used the app for 3 months. And for the first time, the company will actually investigate apps that have abused its policies and take steps to notify users. While many people are rightly questioning whether these changes are too little too late, it'd be wrong to write them off entirely. First, it's important to note that nothing can undo the enormous amount of damage that's already been done. It's now more clear than ever. Facebook royally screwed us, that's not the word they used, with regard to its platform policies. The inherent vulnerabilities in Facebook's platform guidelines meant one company could access millions and millions of people's data with alarming ease. That Cambridge Analytica nabbed data on 50 million people says less about their savvy and more about Facebook's shocking disregard for users' privacy. This isn't limited to Cambridge Analytica, by the way. It may be getting the bulk of the attention, but the tactics were commonplace for years, and Facebook did next to nothing to curb bad behavior. A company called Profile Engine was able to glean data of 420 million Facebook users in 2011, according to the Wall Street Journal. Think about that.
I didn't know there were that many.
Get info on 500 million people.
Why stop at half?
Yeah, no matter how half measures. Why? No matter how drastically Facebook changes its policies now, it can't change what's already out there. Sure, it can ban developers who have engaged in suspicious behavior in the past. What if they've already sold it to a third party? What if the company isn't even around? What happened to the troves and troves of data they gathered after they shut down their quiz app, Farmville knockoff, or whatever is anybody's guess? But you can bet it's still out there somewhere.
Yes.
We talked about some of those quizzes yesterday with the ocean information.
Which quiz are you?
Where Facebook actually can make a difference is by making people aware of just how bad the privacy nightmare is, which is what Zuckerberg said the company plans to do. Facebook says it will conduct an audit and notify users whose data has been misused, including by Cambridge Analytica.
That's everybody.
Yeah.
So just notify all users.
Right? This won't fix anything, but it'll go a long way toward raising awareness.
Yes, that's a good thing by itself.
Now people know to go to their Facebook and go to their, their settings and turn off the apps and turn off the ads if they wish. People can and should do that.
Okay. I'm not sure how to do that, but I don't think I have any apps on or
but
to do anything.
You don't know until you look.
That's true. And I don't know how to look. I forget where my page is.
Well, that's the thing. They don't make it easy.
Right.
But there are, there's a place where you can go to settings, and then you could look at apps, and you can look at privacy, and you can get get an idea of ads. You can look at ads and see who has been sending you ads, and turn those on or off. You can do that if you wish.
And when I do find Facebook, I usually find a little block up in the corner that says, 99. That's the biggest number they can tell me of things I haven't looked at.
Right. When I go on once a year, that's about what happens to me too. But you can go to that and you can do that. Anyway,
We'll
what's more, we shouldn't understate the significance of Facebook's proposed stricter developer guidelines. Facebook's entire business model depends on its ability to use our data to sell us ads. The more data it can offer advertisers and developers for that matter, the more profits. Locking down that data collection could significantly impact its bottom line.
Okay.
So they're doing something, and it's not nothing. It's just that all that stuff's already out there, so it's closing the door after the horse has already left the barn.
Yeah.
And there's other
Jurassic
interesting
Park.
aspects of this as well. One angle, as John Santucci tweets.
John Santucci. Okay.
John Santucci's tweets. And where is that? I gave that to
see
you
it.
there. It says, source with knowledge met with special counsel's team tells ABC investigators that Mueller's team has asked former senior campaign staff about the digital operations, specifically how data was collected and used and how assets were targeted specifically in battleground states.
Okay.
So that means it's now a topic and subject of the Mueller investigation.
Yeah, they said
Another
they don't
side
know.
aspect of this was brought up by a poster on Twitter, Comfortably Smug. I don't have his tweet in front of me, but it runs along the lines of the bigger problem with the 2016 election wasn't Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. It was far more how cable news decided to cover the election with, 100% 24/7 Trump rather than taking a quiz to tell you which Disney princess you were.
Well, it certainly was a big problem. I don't know how much cable TV necessarily. Well, I guess they were watching the Fox News channel, the deplorables, the famous deplorables. But it was certainly a big problem, and it certainly allowed for a lot of the framing that made the online, sort of dark online campaigning plausible. I mean,
Right, well, don't forget also
forgetting,
that, Steve Bannon,
yeah,
through Clinton Cash, made a deal
right.
with the New York Times and the Washington Post for that kind of favorable coverage.
Yeah, and they're not even cable.
So his overall big point is how news media handled it turned out to be a bigger deal than what Cambridge Analytica did in terms of stealing your data. We don't know that.
Still, if you read
that's the
media
point.
now, they will tell you that is not true. So,
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Because we covered him negatively. Therefore, the fact that we had him on
Yeah.
all the time really didn't matter.
It is a huge fight
We're
on
not talking
Twitter.
about Clinton Cash because shut up.
Right. A huge fight on Twitter, and journalists of many stripes, not all stripes, you see, hashtag not all stripes, are defending the media in general, and still not really willing to acknowledge that you could have, say, covered all of the her email stories, et cetera, and still not have been as obsessive about it. And you certainly it was no excuse for like showing for 5 minutes the empty stairs leading down from the door of Trump's plane before a speech. What was that for?
Or showing the entire speech.
Yes,
Why don't you
right.
just show us an
That
excerpt
part
of it?
too. Yeah.
Well, the answer is because it was good for ratings. And, Jeff Zucker's his friend, and that's the way it works.
Oh, all right. Well, at least we have an answer.
So, there's those aspects of it, too, which I think are well worth thinking about. Transitioning a little bit here, this is Greg Sargent writing yesterday. A GOP senator's remarkable admission about Trump and Mueller, and that is to say, this is Bob Corker, who is no longer running for Congress and therefore can speak the truth. And this was pointed out in the Washington Examiner, and Greg Sargent's writing it up.
Oh.
Why Republicans are hesitant to protect Mueller, and this is what happened. Republicans in Congress are hesitant to antagonize President Trump ahead of difficult midterm elections, wary of sparking a backlash from a committed grassroots base more loyal to the White House. We've talked about that. Polls show people are more loyal to Trump than they are to the GOP, if you are a Trump voter. Amid sky-high Democratic enthusiasm, and we just talked about that in regards to those 5 swing state polls showing Democratic senators ahead. Amid sky-high Democratic enthusiasm and a developing blue wave, Republicans can't afford a war with Trump that depresses GOP turnout. Republicans might be worried about Trump's attacks on Mueller, but they're reluctant to push back, much less support legislation to curtail the president's ability to fire Mueller and sideline the federal probe. The president is, as you know, is a quote, "You've seen his numbers among the Republican base, very strong. It's more than strong, it's tribal in nature," said Bob Corker. who decided to retire when his second term concludes at year's end after periodically sparring with Trump. People who tell me, who are out on the trail, say, look, people don't ask about issues anymore. They don't care about issues. They want to know if you're with Trump or not, Corker added.
Okay. Yeah, that's...
So the candy blends from a leading GOP lawmaker into what's really driving the Republican straddle on Mueller. Basically, they don't want to say anything bad about Trump, so they're unwilling to take sides and look like they're supporting Mueller over Trump, because that would be an anti-Trump thing to say. In other words, my words to you and our listening audience, Corker is telling you, I've been out on the trail, people have been out on the trail, they don't care about the rider, they just care about the elephant.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, yeah.
Right. You've
we
heard
know that.
it before.
So this is all an emotional, Trump is our leader, Trump is our warrior, he's flawed, we don't care, he makes libtards run away, and so are you with him or are you against him? Because if you're against him, we're against you.
Yeah, just easy shorthand. It's a lot more, it's a lot simpler than understanding
Policy.
how things work, right?
Yeah. Remember, we were just going over the Dickey Amendment and stuff like that. So how do you feel about the Dickey Amendment, whether or not, funding CDC research in the end, after several decades, will actually help to... I'm for Trump. Yeah. What's your question?
I don't know anything about the Dickey Amendment. I just love the Dickey candidate.
Yeah, well, whatever. So you have that. I mean, position papers on policy ain't going to do it unless you can get it on a bumper sticker.
Right, and why bother having any other bumper sticker than Trump? MAGA.
Yeah. I mean, you can have a bumper sticker that basically says Trump is an idiot, vote for somebody else. That would work. But forget about the whole policy stuff.
They would understand where you were coming from anyway. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you've reduced... I mean, as dumb as the slogan, Make America Great Again, is, that the fact that they had to even reduce that to a smaller bite size...
They did. Drain the swamp.
Amazing. Yeah.
And they field tested it starting in 2015 and 2016.
Oh, right, I see, yeah.
Using Cambridge Analytica.
Right. Yes, we haven't even really gotten to that. And as I ponder the possibility of recording shows for Monday and Tuesday, maybe I just need to read 4 hours of Cambridge Analytica backlog for people. I don't know. I suspect people are reading this on their own because it's so interesting and revealing, and finally we're on to these things, although I find that they're piling up so quickly that I'm unable to even read them on background myself. A new one comes out and I read the lead and say, oh, I'll save that one, and then another one comes. Maybe there's something to catch up with these.
So
okay.
Greg Sargent concludes, Corker has basically conceded that Republicans believe it would alienate the GOP base to signal that removing Mueller would meet with specific consequences. But if this is the case, and Trump does try to shut down or hamstring the probe, that would only further rally Republican voters behind him. Why would it be easier to inflict consequences at that point? If, as Corker says, what matters most in this calculus is what GOP voters think of lawmakers' tribal loyalty to Trump, it would only get harder. And really, why would Trump take any other lesson from what he's seeing right now? In other words, if Republicans aren't acting now when it's a bit easier to do, they're certainly not going to act when it's harder to do.
Yeah. Well, that's likely true. Yeah, right. These voters are not. It's not going to resonate with them ever. That and it probably wouldn't have, even if Trump had never come along. The idea of, well, if this happens, that's a constitutional crisis because blah blah blah. I don't understand. What are you talking about? The United States of America is still here. I can prove it by waking up and calling dominoes, and they still come. There's roads. My money is what they take in exchange for the pizza. What do you mean, constitutional crisis?
Not just for the pizza. April 15th is coming. I got to pay them stuff, so I guess they're still there.
Yeah, right. That's true. That's how I know the government is still intact. You say the government is in tatters and in crisis, but the bill
I still got to pay my bill.
Right.
So.
That's all there is to it on that front.
Anyway, so that's kind of a smorgasbord of issues for today. I thought I would put together for you. I think that right now we're in a holding pattern. It's just, to me, it remains a fascinating thing to look at the GOP base, the ones who are like rabid Trump supporters, understanding, it's a lot about racism and not having a changing America and trying to go back in time, which is impossible. And they kind of know it's impossible. So what else binds them to him? It's the idea in their heads that he could succeed at some of the things that he says. But that isn't really happening. And so where does that leave people? That's one of the reasons why Connor Lamb was able to win in Pennsylvania 18, which, remember, was a plus 20 district. So it's not as simplistic as, well, they'll always stick with him, or that they will all always stick with him. Obviously, some of them are deserting. Otherwise, his numbers wouldn't be, in the 40s, low 40s, high 30s. More people than that originally supported him, and he's lost support and he's not getting him back. Who are those people? Why? What and how can you arrange it so that they don't go back to him? And so I think that's, a lot of where I'm coming from. When Armando, for example, calls in and says, yeah, but basically what motivates them is racism. That's true. The question is, what do you do with that information now that you have established that that's true?
I don't know.
Because you still have to run. And so how do you want to run?
Anti-Trump.
That is going to win most of the time. And all of the pundits who keep saying, well, the Democrats have to have a plan. They do in 2020 when you have a specific person running. And maybe it's something as simple as, not only am I against Trump, but I could beat him in a fist fight.
Yeah.
That's Joe Biden's platform, and it may be enough. Who knows?
I'd like to see it.
Although Rick Wilson had a very funny rejoinder to that.
Work, but yeah.
He said, forget about the fist fight. Just challenge him to run up 3 flights of stairs.
Yeah, that's likely. That'd likely.
I'll take care of it right there. It's the end of the discussion.
Or, you know what? We don't want to stack the deck too much. Right? Walk the course, Donald. Try that this weekend. No cart. Yeah, we'll be down. We'll be, looking at President Pence before the 16th hole.
And not only that, why don't we have a neutral observer keeping score?
Well, the last time that happened, he ended up in bed with Stormy Daniels. That's the same tournament.
Is that what sparked it all?
Yeah,
because,
I think so.
That was a
so
Tahoe weekend, and apparently there was more than Stormy Daniels that weekend.
Right. That he was really on the prowl, and that was because someone else was keeping score, and it was being posted on the internet. That was the last time I think there was a neutral score kept on him, and everybody realized he's not a good golfer, which is fine. Don't worry about it. But and I'm sure at the time he was like, who cares? I'm not that good at golfing, but there's like porn stars all over the place.
Well, that is a very important data point to bring in that we otherwise were unaware of. So with that, I'm going to leave that with you. Maybe you can expound on that for the next hour and 10 minutes. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning.
Hi.
And your omnibus show for the rest of the day will take you wherever it takes you. Who knows? We'll get input from both sides, and we'll see what's happening. Take care, and I will not talk to you on Monday.
Yes,
I guess I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Anyway. So, there. All right, yes, till next Wednesday. Thanks very much, Greg. Lots to go over here. What about this idea of not running? We keep hearing that one, right? Even Greg is skeptical about it. Certainly at this point, and if you don't know who the candidate is going to be, the idea of saying, well, it's not enough to just be anti-Trump. You got to give people something to vote for. I know. Right. This would be my advice, I guess, if I were running a consultancy or of the type that seems to be, let's say, winning the elections, quote unquote, winning the elections on the other side. What about this as a policy? The candidate comes to me and says, I'm advised that you can't just be anti-Trump. That's not enough. You got to give people something to vote for. And I might ask, what is it that Donald Trump is giving his core supporters to vote for? It's not really any actual, concrete accomplishments. It's the idea that he might try or might actually one day succeed in accomplishing various things, which are really either basically impossible for anyone or certainly impossible to someone as incompetent as he is. But it doesn't matter. It's just the idea that of the things that he says that sound attractive to people, and that might be enough passing for something to vote for them, but I'm not really certain that it's the way they see it. It would maybe make an interesting study at some point, but I don't know how far we would want to go into deciding how much the deplorables believe they're going to get delivery on the promises versus they just want a guy who will say that he promises these things. So to the extent that it's the latter, running as non-Trump probably should work for a fairly significant segment of Democratic or Democratic leaning or Democratic susceptible, maybe, voters. And there are probably more of them than there are. I mean, every indication from the polling is that it's a rather small minority that are really in the bag for Trump. There are a number of other folks who kind of get swept up in the excitement for whatever reason. But there's not much going on in the way of positive promises and concrete deliveries. So I guess what I would advise a candidate who comes and says that, and they come in all flavors. I have seen candidates, either candidates for re-election as incumbents in Congress, who occupy more, let's say, purplish, more moderate seats that approach it from a more conservative outlook and say you can't just be an anti-Trump. And I've seen ultra-liberal types out there who are running for office, and not even federal office. I'm thinking, just because it's the most recent example, Cynthia Nixon, who says she's running for governor of New York and doing it from a very liberal perspective, trying to outflank the Democratic, the leading Democratic candidate Cuomo from the left, and but similarly saying, despite the fact that she could very easily fire up her base with an anti-Trump platform, though she's only running for governor, which is very interesting. But she, too, was very quick out of the gate to say, you can't just be anti-Trump. We got to give people something positive to vote for. I would say that certainly at this stage of the game, it's probably enough. If you think that there's a significant sector of your constituency, your potential constituency, that believes that that's true, the thing to do now is your policy is to say that you can't win by being anti-Trump. You got to give people something positive to vote for. Don't have to say what that positive thing is. You might have some ideas about it, and depending on how these issues poll in your district and among your constituency, maybe you want to hint at a few of them. I would say don't bother ever nailing them down. Maybe not even all the way through the election itself. Get yourself in first, figure it out later. I trust that you're smart enough to do that. That would be, of course, the same trick that Donald Trump pulled, and I never believed he was smart enough to nail it down in the end. That's the big difference. And maybe I'm just being tribal about it, but I don't think so. It's not hard to guess whether somebody is smarter and more capable than Donald Trump. That's an easy thing to do. I can tell you from here. I will do remote diagnosis on that one. Anyway, that's the advice, I guess, that I would have for you at this point. If you feel like, and I would test it, I would try and get some data. But if you based on the data, feel like there are enough voters out there who, for whatever reason, buy into this nonsense, and it might be just too late to reverse it. I don't know if it's worth investing any time, effort, or money in convincing people, no, you really don't have to do anything more than be anti-Trump at this point. They want to believe it. I think it makes them feel like they're smarter than deplorables. And so for those people, you say to them, you're right. You have to offer something more than being anti-Trump. That's not enough. You have to give people something positive to vote for. Yeah, you're right. I think the same thing. Yeah, me too. Now, that said, I am anti-Trump. Good, me too. Well, then you should come to the meeting, come to our meetup, and sign up as a volunteer. Maybe you want to contribute to the campaign. Yes, I do. Excellent. I'm so glad that you validated my feeling that you really have to be more than just anti-Trump. Well, good. I'm happy to be the home. We're happy. Our campaign is happy to be the home of the thinking voter. Absolutely right. Thank you. I'm so glad you did this. I'm behind you 100%. hopefully they don't get around to. So what is that thing, that positive thing that there is to vote for? Because right now, that positive thing is I am, one, anti-Trump, and I know that wasn't what you came for. What you came for was to hear me say that you got to be for something more. And you do. Hallelujah. The deal is sealed. That's all you have to do at this point. Now, as for opening a consultancy, that is something I'm thinking, fantasizing about. We actually have to go and do something like that. Why? What do we mean by that? It occurred to me late at night, last night, and probably before then, too, that the Cambridge Analytica story was playing out in a way that revealed to me a little bit about the scam that the Mercers are running. And we've been on to the Mercers scam for some time, and their network of consultancies, their network of politicians and super PACs, et cetera, and how they move money around and how they have financed, for instance, had financed anyway, the political career such as it was of Steve Bannon, that there was really nothing that he had ever done. Well, I could just put a period on the end of that sentence. Nothing he had ever done that the Mercers hadn't paid for. And I got to thinking about what it is that they pay for. And it struck me in a short series of tweets that began last night that the Mercers have a terrific scam going. We always guessed that it was one. But specifically, what I'm thinking about here is, as super rich mega donors, they are in a position to give a tremendous amount of money, and everybody knows that they're in a position to give a tremendous amount of money to a candidate, any candidate, several candidates, maybe all candidates, both their campaigns, their super PACs, independent expenditures on their behalf, et cetera, et cetera. And so if they hold out that they can do that for you, you will listen. Now, as your largest donor, you might say to them, I have some advice for you. You could put it as strongly as saying I have a demand in exchange for my big money, but and that's always the case. But what's interesting about the Mercers is that demand can be, you gotta hire Cambridge Analytica. They're the smartest, they're the best, they'll get you elected, and it sounds like sound campaign advice. But since they're owners of Cambridge Analytica, since they sit on the board, since they profit from it, all it is a giant kickback of the big money they were supposedly turning over to you. Weird. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, back from our 1 minute break. And I'd like to, I think, finish up the short tweet storm that this late night thought generated from me, and then I'll launch into a number of other topics which we really need to get to in order to thoroughly cover the news this day. It's so urgent that even Greg has second thoughts about having left it out of the wrap-up and has sent these links to me. And he's quite right. They also reside, many of them, in Pocket, which means I intended to share them with you at some point. We might as well get to that. But just to clarify my point, I guess we'll just go slowly over this. Oh, my goodness. I just saw something bizarro on Twitter. And, like a dog, I'm easily distracted. All right. Should I even share what it is? It's from Now This News. I don't follow them, but somebody retweeted them into my timeline. Now This. Ketchup slices are a real thing now. And it looks like it's basically like tomato fruit leather. And it is fruit leather because tomato is a fruit. But ketchup leather, essentially. And you just, in this picture, they're like laying it on top of a hamburger like a slice of American cheese, which is something I don't do. I don't like cheeseburgers. But I like slice technology, is what I'm saying. This is going to be big with Donald Trump. He can coat an entire steak and be sure of getting every inch of it slathered. My kids are going to be big into this. Probably the biggest thing for them since the as yet unrevealed to them. I took a picture of it in the supermarket, but I haven't showed it to them yet. Lucky Charms Frosted Flakes. It's like a combination cereal. It's not actual Kellogg's Frosted Flakes. Side note about trademark and copyright law. Apparently, Frosted Flakes, too generic a term to be trademarked. Therefore, General Mills, which makes Lucky Charms, was able to add, they've taken out the oat pieces, the frosted oat pieces, the superfluous part. Most of you know it as the superfluous part of Lucky Charms cereal. You're there for the marshmallows. They've taken that out and they've replaced that with frosted flakes, frosted cornflakes. Not Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, but their own version of Frosted Flakes O-Corn. And it's out there, and that should be very exciting for children everywhere. BuzzFeed News has already reviewed the product and given it a thumbs up. At least my younger son, probably very likely going to be interested in that. And then I guess I'll pick up some ketchup slices on the way, too. This is, it might be the end of civilization. I'm not positive that that's the case. But ketchup slices, that's, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Disgusting and yet fascinating. Because I should be talking about the treason at the heart of the Trump administration and how it's destroying America and undermining our constitutional structure, as rendering it inoperable. But instead, ketchup slices. So where I was before I was so entertainingly interrupted was explaining the Mercers particular scam. And I don't think that they're the first to arrive at it, but it might be the most self-aware version of the scam. Similar scams have been run, but this one is really something. You got the mega rich Mercers, and they're totally into, Robert Mercer, totally into data analysis, moneyballing everything that he can. In his case, initially investing. Well, that's where the big money came from. He was a computer scientist first, right? And I guess that's where the data analysis interest came from. And then he became a hedge fund bazillionaire by moneyballing all of his investments. So not surprising that he would be very interested in a political consultancy that does the same, that essentially moneyballs the digital campaign and, analyzes it in small, thin enough slices like ketchup that they can micro-target really pretty much individual voters in key places. As much as we hate Trump and as much as we think Cambridge Analytica is an evil operation, it really is sort of brilliant in an evil genius kind of a way. If you can understand, it's hacking the Electoral College, which, by the way, one more time, we should remind ourselves, great job, Electoral College, making yourself relevant in the modern era. Everybody knew that this was going to be a disaster. Everybody implored you to simply exercise the authority you were apparently given by the Constitution and not make this guy president. But you went ahead and did it anyway because you thought your hands were tied. Well, gee, I think I might get in trouble if I cast a vote for somebody else. People fought and died in a revolution so that you could do that, but you stay out of trouble. Anyway, we'll get back to that some other day. And let's get on to this other train of thought. The Mercers, essentially, with their big money, can influence politics. We know that that's the case, and lots of mega donors before them have done similarly. Of course, the floodgates have really opened since Citizens United, but you can now offer almost unlimited support to 1, 2, a dozen, all politicians, however many you want. It's only limited by your resources. And of course, in our original system, it was never anticipated that anybody would have such unlimited resources, much less that an entire class of people would have unlimited resources. But it was still mostly limited to the idea of, we'll give you lots and lots of money, and then you'll listen to us about policy because you're so grateful for our support. It works. It's not foolproof from the donor perspective, but it works pretty well. But there's a way to improve on it in two directions. One, there's a way to improve on the compliance side, that is, that politicians that then win election will likely implement your policy as close to unchanged as possible. But there's also a way to make your money go further, to recycle it, if you will. And that, I think, is the particular genius of what the Mercers are doing. They give huge donations, millions of dollars, to single politicians. So there are, in some cases, many politicians that'll get $1 million plus, or could potentially get $1 million plus from a big donor. But you wonder once in a while, like, how worth it is it to give away chunks of $1 million to somebody else for any reason? Even if you think you're buying them lock, stock, and barrel, eventually they'll disappoint you on something. Is this really a good investment? Well, it's certainly a much better investment if you get all that money back. In other words, if you are giving somebody a donation of $1 million bill, let's say, you could mint $1 million bill, print $1 million bill, but put it on a string, like the stupid old Practical Joke, and yank it back, and it ends up remaining with you, even though the other person thinks they've pocketed it. Well, what if you could expand that to, and really do that in politics? I gave you $1 million, so do what I say, and then $1 million ends up back in your pocket anyway. And that's sort of what was going on, of course, in a much more indirect fashion. If you're, for instance, to the Koch brothers, I'll give you $1 million, and what you'll do in return for me is lower taxes for the rich, and then that $1 million will end up back in my pocket with interest through the tax cut. In other words, I'll give you my private money. You will pocket my private money, run for office with it, win office, lower taxes, and then reimburse me from out of the Treasury. And that will still happen. That's part of what makes the Mercer plan so great, is I'll still get reimbursed out of the National Treasury, but I actually physically want that $1 million I gave to you back, handed to me, not processed through the IRS, not having to wait until it's time for tax refunds, or not having to wait to realize those gains until tax time. I want to give you $1 million, have you do my bidding, and then yank that $1 million back out of your pocket, and then offer it to somebody else and do the same trick with them. Much more efficient. The way the Mercers are able to do it, they'll give you $1 million, and they'll say, listen, as your biggest donor, as your chief sponsor, basically, I own you, more or less. I just gave you the biggest chunk of money you're ever going to get. In fact, if you think you're going to get $1 million from another rich mega donor, I'll give you $2 million. I got to be that important to you. Now, how is it possibly worth it to me to give you or your super PAC or whatever $2 million? For one thing, you're going to do my bidding and cut my taxes. I'm going to get more than $2 million back. And for another thing, I'm actually going to get that $2 million back, because my demand to you in exchange for my big, big money, or if you prefer, if you're one of those independent types that doesn't like to be told what to do, my suggestion to you is that you hire the hottest property, the best political consultancy out there, the guys who made Donald Trump president, despite all the odds, the guys who can micro-target individual voters in key districts, who can hack the electoral college system, who know exactly, if you're running for president, know exactly how many votes need to be moved in which towns where, and where are the rural people in these states that can give us their electoral votes, that basically don't know the difference, what the hell's going on, and can be told that this candidate is for them, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but he's got no conscience, so it doesn't matter very much, and it might be more difficult with another candidate. Or, where are the people that we can target to make you, the long shot, actually win? Well, that's a very attractive prospect. Plus, they just gave you $2 million, and you're probably inclined to listen to them, inclined to indulge them. You're inclined to recognize the fact that they are basically telling you that our money and your access to it is contingent on your taking our advice on this and showing us in some concrete way that you value our opinion and are going to listen to us. Fine, I'll hire your consultancy, but except it really is your consultancy. It's it's the Mercers. They sit on the board. I don't know what the ownership structure is like, and maybe in the future it will be a lot cleaner and more direct than the way the Mercers have done it. But essentially, what the game is, as they've set it up, is I'll give you $1 million. You should hire these great consultants. And these great consultants, I have an ownership stake in. And so the money I put in your pocket that I then demand, essentially, that you use to hire Cambridge Analytica, that would be in scare quotes, is then recycled back into my pocket. And it's available for me to use again on politician number 2. You too should be working with Cambridge Analytica. They're brilliant. And in some cases, you might even end up paying Cambridge Analytica more money than I gave you. Now, not all of that money goes directly into my pocket. I have to share it with some of the other people over at Cambridge Analytica. But this is a great way to recycle the same dollars and use them over and over again to buy more and more influence. So I think that they've really hit on a terrific scam here. And maybe in the future, the lines will be cleaner, and every mega rich, mega donor will own or have an interest in their own consultancy, and they'll be able to up the ante and give politicians more and more money funneled through super PACs or what have you, in exchange for their agreeing to hire their consultancy. So now not only do you get your money back, but you can more directly control what the campaign does, because now the consultants who are running the campaign are also in your pocket. The politician will do your bidding and listen to you personally and hire consultants that, if you hide the relationship well enough, will likewise be giving this candidate your marching orders. So they'll be hearing it from both sides. Lots of people want this done, not just this one terribly rich person. As much as I'd like to do their bidding and make them happy, I am vaguely aware of the fact that there's another constituency out there, the 500,000 or so people I represent in Congress, or the 18 million people in my home state, or the 300 million people of the United States of America, depending on what office you're running for. So I want to see some data that tells me I'm adequately representing them, because, you really should keep an eye on your constituency too, not just your rich donor. Well, what if your consultants are telling you the polling says the Mercers are right? You absolutely should do this thing that's enormously popular in your district. And our game plan for you is to do exactly that, and it's going to win, and it's huge, and everyone loves it. Whether that's true or not. If it is true, bonus for you, you actually come out as a winner, and you get to your chance to legislate as the Mercers would have you do. And if not, all right, you're just another loser. Big deal. It's a tough year, blue wave year, whatever, nothing you could do, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they've set up a terrific situation for themselves there. And, likely that we'll see it become a model for the future as more and more mega donors emerge and realize that they can, in fact, conquer the world this way, let's say. Let's just put it that way and put that out there. All right, so lots more to catch up on, lots of other angles on all of this stuff. Just thought I would explain that one to you and get you up to speed on those things. Oh, let's see, a few other comments here. How is the Warlock was asking, how is the Mercer scam a scam? And I think we've just gone over a lot of that. And I guess it's not a scam in the sense that people are, I don't think the politicians are completely unaware of what they're participating in. But if they really had no idea, for instance, you just happen to really like this consultancy and they have a good track record, okay, I'll take your recommendation and go from there. Is that all you're suggesting? And if you do it blindly, then I guess it really is a scam. Of course, you're not likely to leave it to fate when you're talking about millions of dollars. You probably hint to them, maybe very transparently, that the reason you trust this consultancy more than any other is it's yours. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. But I think the potential is out there. It's got a lot of potential, this plan. Let's see, what other comments have? Oh, Matthew Rigdon wanted to talk about the catch-up. With this new With word of this new ketchup development, doesn't this mean John Kerry will have mad money to swing elections? Ooh, maybe. What are our billionaires doing? They are putting up billboards that say impeachment now. I'm not certain whether that's helping anything, but until now I haven't had much more to offer them by way of strategy. Now I think I do. It's dirty and horrible, but I guess we should probably do it. I don't know. Maybe it isn't horrible. Maybe we could be very transparent about it and it wouldn't be so dirty. It depends how our candidates feel about it. But we have the difficulty of having to deal with very often a slate of candidates who are independent-minded and have ideas and know why they want to run for office. Not the case necessarily on the Republican side. Much easier to manipulate. All right. Have we caught up with our comments? I think so. Let's now go over to some of the other things that have caught my eye on Twitter that are much more relevant than slices of ketchup and things that Greg has sent on. Carol Cadwallader is back at it and tweeting again. How recent are these things? I guess this is from yesterday, but being retweeted into my timeline. Yes. Yesterday's work over on the other side of the pond, the expose by The Guardian of Cambridge Analytica's work in campaigns in other countries, not just the UK, but also elsewhere, Nigeria and in St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean as well. Very interesting as we identify different areas in which they've been active, literally a take over the world sort of situation. Why those countries? I'm not sure, but The Guardian has put an awful lot of work into figuring that out. As Carol tweets here, this story took months to stand up, but I have 7 sources on record and eyewitness accounts. Israeli hackers worked alongside Cambridge Analytica and hacked the current president of Nigeria and the Prime Minister of St. Kitts. I should be curious someday to find out why Israeli hackers were interested in that at all, and what, I mean, other than income, was the interest of Cambridge Analytica in working in those countries. I don't know. However, it's like St. Kitts and Nevis. It makes me think, like, what if you could take a island, Caribbean island nation that wasn't currently functioning purposefully as a offshore banking haven, but turn it into one. I don't know if there's any relative advantage to being a first mover in a brand new offshore tax haven or not. Like, what would be, why do that when you could just go to Grand Cayman Islands and be the 800th company to open an offshore bank account there, or in Bermuda or wherever else. But maybe there's still some nettlesome restrictions that bother you about doing business in Cayman Islands. I have to give a real name or something like that. Wouldn't it be great if there was another country that just literally didn't care whether you gave a real name or not? Because you can still trace people through things, and LLCs make things difficult, but eventually these reporters, they always find out, what if I could just give a fake name? Well, no country allows that. Well, what if I took over one that, and then legislated it such that it was possible to do? Oh, well, that would be, I guess if you could convince somebody to do that, that would work. And, okay, terrific. We'll try that. And maybe St. Kitts and Nevis is just that possibility. I'm just guessing. I haven't read this story yet. But now I'm excited to do so. And maybe it'll turn into a pre-recorded show at some point. I'm glad I saw that one. Let's see. A couple of other things that I opened up. Not the catch-up thing. Gary Kasparov, who is said to have something of a strategic mind, and to know something about Russia, is tweeting in response to dumb Donald Trump this morning. Actually, was it Trump's things this morning or yesterday? I think his yesterday afternoon tweets about, being friends with Russia and getting along with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. And he continued on to then say, they can help solve problems with North Korea, Syria, Ukraine. Yeah, they can help solve problems with Ukraine by leaving. ISIS, Iran, and even, this was interesting, the coming arms race. He capitalizes arms and race for some reason, and it did make people stop and question, what do you mean coming arms race? What are we talking about here? It may be a thing, or it may be nothing. Like, I don't know. I'm talking about Russia, and when you talk about Russia, you talk about arms races. But isn't that over? Well, there's another one then. It's coming. I don't know. It's hard to tell whether he's just babbling. Bush tried to get along, but didn't have the smarts, which he encloses in scare quotes, which is appropriate, I think. Obama and Clinton tried, but didn't have the energy or chemistry. Remember reset, which he writes in all capitals. Peace through strength, he then writes in all capitals. Gary Kasparov commenting, we need Russia's help is the same excuse Bush and Obama made. Putin gives missile technology to North Korea, slaughters in Syria, invades Ukraine, sends fighters to ISIS and Iran, and Iran is a top client. There we go. Russia is the problem. There's no peace through appeasement. I guarantee you, of course, the same attitude would be recognized as appeasement very rapidly in a Democratic president. But it's a good thing for Donald Trump and maybe any Republican. All right. So let's say I mentioned that there was a few things that Greg had passed on that we want to include in things here. The first was another of the gun issues. YouTube just took a stand against gun violence and gun something. Gun what? Gun videos, I know. There we are. Yeah, there we are. YouTube bans gun demo videos and videos that link to gun sales sites. It's a start, it says, and it is here at secondnexus.com. I verified that news, or I say I'll vouch for that news because I heard the same thing earlier from other sources. Here's the deal. It is what it is. YouTube introduced new guidelines that ban videos involving weapons, including videos showing how to assemble a firearm or install certain accessories such as a high-capacity magazine. Now, presumably that would also apply to installing certain accessories like bump stocks, which is a very popular category of videos on YouTube, and a major sales vector for bump stocks. You can see it in action, see how it works, and then order at the end of the video, which, you know, you could do with any video. You just put a card up that says, here's how you order. But apparently that's to be banned on YouTube. Now, there are some other things that I think maybe you might think it's overkill to ban them. And there's going to be a lot of pushback and a lot of protest, and the gun nuts are going to, I think, be able to successfully make some hay out of this. I guess it also might include, or it's hinted here by including a video like this, that it might include how to strip and clean and reassemble weapons that you might already own, which is kind of, sort of, valuable information. I don't know on balance. I mean, it's valuable information. I don't know whether on balance it's valuable or better or worse to have it on YouTube, only because I have also read in the course of all my gun fail story collections a number of stories of people who have bought weapons and then gone on YouTube to learn how to strip and clean them and reassemble them, and then have accidentally fired those weapons very often into their neighbors' homes while doing that. And, I'll take the gun position, the pro-gun position on this for just a moment and say, I don't know that it's necessarily the fault of the video that happened. But I won't be totally pro-gun. For instance, it definitely couldn't have happened if those people hadn't been allowed to buy those guns. They would not have been able to accidentally fire them into the neighbor's house, no matter how good or bad the video is, I guess, is the most I can say about this. But anyway, I noted it yesterday. I was a little bit semi-disappointed in the whole thing, only because YouTube was my go-to source for the videos that demonstrated beyond any shadow of a doubt that all semi-automatic weapons of any kind, including handguns, can be bump fired, that is to say, fired in a way that emulates machine gun fire without any accessories whatsoever. We went over this. I spent some time discussing it and pointed you to some of the videos, and that was a helpful tool to be able to show people, say, via social media in ways that they understood. Click this button, see this video on YouTube, and you too will have demonstrated for you before your very eyes the fact that, yes, a Glock handgun can be fired like a machine gun if it is semi-automatic, and you don't need any special accessories to do it. You can just do it by hand, and therefore you've been fooled the whole time. They snuck these semi-automatic weapons past us as though they were something different, and they really aren't, and maybe it's too late now, but it was good information, and I guess that's gone. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. When I last left off, of course, I was telling you, according to this article here on Second Nexus and other sources I have seen elsewhere, the YouTube folks have decided to ban the weapons promotion videos. I think it's, generally speaking, still a pretty good idea because, people tend to take these things a little bit too far. There was definitely a weird vibe to a lot of these videos, and of course maintaining those channels very often tempts the sellers of those guns, and there usually are gun shops that keep these things, and they use it as advertising materials. And in the abstract, that's not such a bad thing, but it does sometimes tempt them to stray into the political and very often get themselves in trouble. Like, for instance, the guy who runs the gunfighting school down in Tennessee, tactical response or whatever the hell he called it, tactical something or other. That's the hot word to use for these things. And because the platform was available to him, he did dumb stuff like threaten President Obama and government figures and people in general, the populace of Tennessee in general, in his videos, and he got himself in trouble. And, it would be smart of them to refrain from doing such things, and maybe YouTube can help them do it. But that's not going to stop these guys from using this marketing channel. It's been pretty lucrative for them. And they're already angrily denouncing YouTube and announcing their intention to migrate to Instagram and Facebook. And I don't think that they will necessarily have very much luck in that, because my guess is that Instagram and Facebook will follow suit very quickly. Besides which, many of these are owned by the same umbrella companies anyway. I guess Facebook is out on its own. But are Instagram and YouTube not both Google properties? So I don't know how successful they're going to be migrating to Instagram, but these are very dumb people. So you got to understand that. And they're going to say these things, and that's not their last resort either. Although I did see somebody observing yesterday, was it Matt Ortega, saying, "Oh God, Vimeo can't get a break." Here's an actual, reason to have a whole sector migrating off of YouTube. They could be going to the competitor, I guess, if you consider a competitor. But and nobody's doing it anyway. Too bad. Who cares? They've settled on a different possible solution. We'll see how long this one lasts. It's rather ingenious in the sense that it's good to see creative thinking out there. They thought, we'll move to that other video platform we enjoy so much, Pornhub. Now, I want to state for the record that this audience has no idea what Pornhub is and has never heard of it and is not interested. Thank you. Thank you very much. But that's where I guess these guys think they're going to move their stuff there. I guess they figure, well, if they're going to have porn on there, then they're certainly not going to object to having gun videos on there because something. I'm not really sure what the thinking is. Maybe they think clearly a place like, that would be called Pornhub would not have a great deal of interest in censorship. But they might just have a brand in mind and say, yeah, but that's not, I know you guys consider your guns to be porn in a way, but that's not what we're up to. And just on branding grounds, they could just say, yeah, we're not interested in having that. Or they may say, that's dumb. We forget the branding issue. We may like porn but hate guns. I don't know how many. There is some overlap in that. There's certainly porn loving, gun loving people out there as well. But we'll see. I'm not sure who's running Pornhub these days or ever, for that matter, or whether we should even care what they're going to do with this. But it does make for an interesting twist on the story. All right. The other story that Greg sent my way that is burning a hole in my virtual pocket. The New York Times report of, a number of overlapping threads here. Where do we start? Let me, in fact, go first to Pocket. I don't even have Pocket open. That's how engaged we've been in other sources for the day here. Like I said, it's uniting a lot of threads here. I'll start with... don't even know where to do it. I'll start with the Intercepts piece, because it was the first one I saw that made this explicit, which is coverage of what Jared Kushner is up to with his pals, if you want to call them that, in the Middle East, specifically Saudi Arabia. Now, the Saudis were in town yesterday, I think, or maybe the day before, photographed, very interestingly, at the White House visiting with Trump and cabinet in the cabinet room, which is also kind of interesting. I don't think, do you normally host foreign governments in the cabinet room? I don't think there might not be anything taboo about that, but there's lots of other rooms in the White House. It's got a big table, right? But the thing that actually struck me as weird was, one, that they were meeting in the cabinet room. Two, side note, that the protocol officers set the flags up backwards such that the flags visible in the photos behind President Trump during the meeting had the Saudi flag to its own right, which is ordinarily, according to the U.S. flag code, where the U.S. flag belongs. I know you want to have the flags of both nations there, but as the viewer is looking at it, or rather as they put it in the flag code, the flag has its own. It's a sentient being. It knows that it is supposed to be to its own right. In other words, if the flag were a person on the stage looking out at the audience, he would want to be, on his own, to his own right. He or she, it's probably the flag, almost certainly female. I don't know. And that's why Donald Trump was groping it so much. But that flag was supposed to be to its own right. Instead, the Saudish flag, the personal coat of arms, if you will, was displayed to our flag's right. And disrespect, yargle bargle, throw that son of a bitch out of here. It's worse than taking a knee, something nobody's noticing. I don't know why no one noticed. Second thing that I thought was odd about it, third thing, I guess. First thing, that you hosted the foreign delegation in the cabinet room, which is really for, the cabinet to discuss domestic affairs. Second, got the flags wrong. Third, set the table for a meal. Don't think I've ever seen that. Again, not sure if that's any kind of breach of protocol. Not certain that it hasn't happened in previous presidencies. Not really even certain that it's, weird or unusual or disrespectful or anything like that in any way. It didn't look comfortable. It looked very strange, and it just made me think, this guy has got to have a meal every time he sits down. He just can't stop stuffing his face. That's the way he likes to do business, and now he's got so much business to do on behalf of the United States, not that he's accomplishing any of it. There's a plate in front of him wherever he goes. I think it's disgusting, and I've had enough of it. I can't think anymore about him stuffing his face, on my dime, by the way. And maybe he's just never going to leave as long as we keep stocking the kitchen. Maybe we can starve him out of the place. Anyway, that wasn't what we came here to discuss. It was, well, we'll give it to you headline-wise from The Intercept. Saudi Crown Prince boasted that Jared Kushner was, quote, in his pocket. That's a bad quote about a political actor. You don't want that quote out there. He might not be telling the truth. I don't know whether you can trust the Saudi Crown Prince. He might just be out to get Jared Kushner. He may have said nothing like it. I don't know. We'll let The Intercept tell us on this one. Alex Emmons, Ryan Grimm, Clayton Swisher, pretty good team, had this one late afternoon yesterday. Until he was stripped of his top secret security clearance in February, presidential advisor Jared Kushner was known around the White House as one of the most voracious readers of the president's daily brief. Remember that? The PDB. The highly classified rundown of the latest intelligence intended only for the president and his closest advisors. Of course, it was a weird thing. They had a pretty big distribution list pretty quickly inside the Trump White House. And yes, it was a known thing to us that Jared Kushner was one of the more voracious readers of it, and people wondered why. And is that dangerous given that he's now been stripped of his security clearance? I'll just continue on here. Kushner, who has been tasked with bringing about a deal between Israel and Palestine, was particularly engaged by information about the Middle East, according to a former White House official and a former U.S. intelligence professional. And that makes a certain amount of sense. If you thought he was competent to that task, which he's not, and so therefore it doesn't make any sense. But okay, in his own mind, he's been tasked with this thing. If I'm incompetent, and I am, and I'm tasked with peace in the Middle East, I'll read about the Middle East. That's okay. But there's more. In June, Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman ousted his cousin, then Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, and took his place, as next in line to the throne. And remember, it's a throne over there, upending the established line of succession. In the months that followed, the president's daily brief contained information on Saudish Arabia's evolving political situation, of course, including a handful of names of royal family members opposed to the Crown Prince's power grab, according to the former White House official, and 2 U.S. government officials with knowledge of the report. And there aren't that many out there, but okay. So yes, the president, as a matter of course, would be getting information about, hey, what's going on in Saudi Arabia? That's an important place. The line of succession is changing. There's essentially a coup going on over there. What's up with that? Who's taking which sides? What's good about it? What's bad about it? What should we do? Right? So included in those reports are, okay, Mohammed bin Salman, again, now these days known as MBS. There's an MBZ out there and an MBS. But MBS in Saudi Arabia is taking over. Is it peaceful? Is everybody on his side? No, there are some dissenters, some of whom are known to you and have been prior actors in U.S.-Saudish relations. These are their names. Dangerous when you're giving that out to spies and compromised individuals. In late October, Jared Kushner made an unannounced trip to... I didn't finish up the previous paragraph, but basically those White House officials and U.S. government officials with knowledge of the report, anonymous, obviously, because they would pretty much be drawn and quartered if they put their name to the report. So, in late October, Jared Kushner made an unannounced trip to Riyadh, that's in Saudi Arabia, catching some intelligence officials off guard. Why is a senior advisor to the president just jetting to Saudi Arabia? Now, this quote comes from a Washington Post report on the event. The 2 princes, and I think they mean here the actual prince in Saudi Arabia and the little prince, Jared Kushner, The two princes are said to have stayed up until nearly 4 a.m. several nights. Interesting. Swapping stories and planning strategy. Oh. Well, that was according to the reports of David Ignatius for the Washington Post. What exactly Kushner and the Saudi royal talked about in Riyadh may be known only to them. But after the meeting, Crown Prince Mohammed told confidants that Kushner had discussed the names of Saudis disloyal to the Crown Prince. In other words, it sounds like what they're insinuating here anyway is he basically told them what I read in the Presidential Daily Brief. I, as a member of the president's inner circle, got the information on who's disloyal to you. That was supposed to be for our purposes in case we needed to know either were we talking to somebody loyal to the regime or do we need to undermine the regime? If so, who should we be talking to? Do we want to cooperate with the regime? Therefore, should we, say in a legitimate American administration with that information, as opposed to, if we wanted to undermine the regime, should we send arms to this person? We might do that. But in less warlike fashion, we might say, for instance, if we got information that was damaging to the regime, the Saudish regime, but it came from this source, and we were able to identify from our reading of the PDB, which never happens for Trump, but I guess did happen for Jared, that this was an opposition figure, whether open or cloaked, in their opposition, you might take the information damaging to the regime with a grain of salt. It is important to know these things in a legitimate American administration. But Jared had a different purpose for this information, it seems. So one of the things that Crown Prince Mohammed told his confidants that Kushner did was tell him the names of Saudis disloyal to him. This according to three sources who have been in contact with members of the Saudi and Emirati royal families. This gets us to another thread. Since the crackdown, Kushner, through his attorney's spokesperson, denies having done so. Very eloquently denied. Some questions by the media are so obviously false and ridiculous that they merit no response. This is one. The Intercept should know better, said Peter Mirijanian, a spokesperson for Kushner's lawyer, Abby Lowell. Still consistently disappointed by Abby Lowell's willingness to represent the Kushners, but okay. On November 4th, a week after Kushner returned to the U.S., the Crown Prince, known in official Washington by his initials MBS, launched what he called an anti-corruption crackdown. The Saudi government arrested dozens of members of the Saudi royal family and imprisoned them in the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh. A fact I think we noted at least in passing. I still have some articles of details about what was going on there that are unbelievable that I never was able to share with you. But I was very interested in the events itself. You may remember when we discussed those, because I don't remember the date, but I think I was taping shows, and we were in New Jersey at the time, as I recall, when I read that news. Anyway, so the Saudi government arrested suddenly all these people who were, I guess, not previously known to the Saudi regime to be opposition figures, but suddenly were revealed as opposition figures after Jared Kushner, who could have read their names in the PDB, visited unannounced and stayed up until 4 a.m. with the prince, with nobody else around, so nobody knows what they actually talked about. A little suspicious. The Saudi embassy did not respond to questions from The Intercept. The White House referred questions to National Security Council spokesperson Michael Anton. Anton declined to comment. He, in turn, referring questions to Kushner's discussions with MBS to Abby Lowell, outside counsel. That does seem odd, doesn't it? President's closest advisor flies to Saudi Arabia in a official capacity, possibly reveals the contents of the PDB to a foreign sovereign. The opposition on that basis rounded up and imprisoned, and we ask, hey, how did that happen? And the White House essentially says, you'll have to talk to that guy's private attorney. That is something. I don't know exactly how to put that, except damn close to an admission that he's acting ultra-virus here, I guess you could say. It is likely that Crown Prince Mohammed would have known who his critics were without Kushner mentioning them. A U.S. government official who declined to be identified pointed out the Crown Prince may also have had his own reasons for saying that Kushner shared information with him, even if that wasn't true. Good point. Just the appearance that Kushner did so would send a powerful message to the Crown Prince's allies and enemies that his actions were backed by the U.S. government. Worth thinking about. One of the people MBS told about the discussion with Kushner was UAE Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, right? According to a source who talks frequently to confidants of the Saudi and Emirati rulers, MBS bragged to the Emirati Crown Prince and others that Kushner was, quote, in his pocket, the source told The Intercept. Access to the president's daily brief is tightly guarded, but Trump has the legal authority to allow Kushner to disclose information contained in it. You can sort of insta-declassify anything. If he gets in trouble, that we learned that during the George W. Bush regime, that if outing spies were to get you in trouble, you could simply insta-declassify that spy's cover and get anybody who had revealed it, who you were friends with, off the hook. If Kushner discussed names with MBS as an approved tactic of U.S. foreign policy, the move would be a striking intervention by the U.S. into an unfolding power struggle at the top levels of an allied nation. And remember, Sarah Huckabee Sanders just told us we don't dictate that stuff to other countries. Ha ha. Of course we do. If Kushner discussed the names with the Saudi prince without presidential authorization, however, he may have violated federal laws around sharing of classified intelligence. On November 6th, 2 days after the detentions in the Ritz began, Trump took to Twitter to defend the crackdown. That is, the Saudish crackdown. Tweeting, I have great confidence in King Salman and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. They know exactly what they are doing. I have great confidence. And then following that up with, some of those they are harshly treating have been, quote, milking their country for years. So now he's all about corruption in Saudi Arabia, you see. In the months that followed, the arrestees were coerced into signing over billions in personal assets to the Saudi government, which of course means to the Crown Prince. They say it like, oh, well, he's giving the money to the government, so it's going to the treasury, so it's not anybody's personally. Remember, Saudi Arabia is a personal fiefdom, and when you sign assets over to the Saudi government, it's to this guy. He owns the government. In December, the London-based Arabic-language newspaper Al-Quds Al-Arabi reported that Major General Ali al-Qahtani had been tortured to death in the Ritz. Qahtani's body showed signs of mistreatment, including a neck that was twisted unnaturally as though it had been broken, bruises and burn marks that appeared to be from electric shocks, the New York Times reported earlier this month. I don't know how bad you're supposed to feel for Saudish army generals. I mean, torture's bad and all. I don't know whether I don't know the guy's background. I don't know how to put it in context. Senior U.S. government officials have long worried about Kushner's handling of sensitive foreign policy issues, given his lack of diplomatic experience. They've also raised concerns about the possibility that foreign officials might try to influence him through business deals with his family's real estate empire. Special counsel Robert Muller is reportedly examining Kushner's business ties as part of his ongoing probe. The Washington Post reported this week that former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster expressed early concern that Kushner was freelancing U.S. foreign policy. According to the Post, Tillerson once asked staffers in frustration, "Who is the Secretary of State here?" The new answer, "Not you." Indeed, Kushner has grown so close to the Saudi and Emirati crown princes that he has communicated with them directly using WhatsApp, a reasonably secure messaging app owned by Facebook and popular in the Middle East, according to a senior Western official and a source close to the Saudi royal family. Asked about Kushner's use of WhatsApp to communicate with foreign officials, his attorney's spokesperson, Mirijanian, said, without commenting on who he talks to and how he does his work, Mr. Kushner, by the way, what about his emails? He's conducting U.S. foreign policy on WhatsApp, owned by Facebook. Anyway, how he does his work. Mr. Kushner is in conformity with the Presidential Records Act and other rules, except he's not, because if you can't read what he says on WhatsApp, then he's not. Or at least if there's no record of it. And who knows whether there is or isn't. You'll never find out until later when you find out that there isn't. Kushner's attorneys have since told him not to use the app for official business, according to a source with direct knowledge of the exchange, which is because they know that it isn't in compliance with the Presidential Records Act, and Mirijanian is basically lying here. Kushner's unconventional communications with regional leaders excluded diplomats during the summer of 2017 when Saudi Arabia and the UAE initiated an economic blockade aimed at weakening their Gulf neighbor, Qatar. Tillerson's attempts to mediate the crisis were quickly undercut by Trump and Kushner, who supported the blockade. 3 State Department officials told The Intercept that Tillerson was largely in the dark about Kushner's communications with MBS during that period. The article goes on, of course, at some length, and I do recommend that you take a look at it. The obvious implication in all of this, of course, Kushner desperately seeking financing for his real estate ventures that are going slowly under, or maybe rapidly under, approached Qatar about it. Sovereign Wealth Fund of Qatar says no. Suddenly, there's a blockade of Qatar and by the UAE and Saudi Arabia with the support of the Trump administration and presumably Jared Kushner. And then, secret midnight meetings with the Crown Prince, who has just stolen the assets of all of the rest of the royal family and is now flush with cash and has been getting provided at least backup of his own intelligence, possibly, by Jared Kushner reading him the presidential daily brief, either in person or tweeting it to him over or WhatsApp. What do you say about it? You're not tweeting because you're tweeting. That's for Twitter. What is it called when you send a message on WhatsApp? I don't know. Apping? I have no idea. Direct message? Someone who knows can tell me. Anyway, that isn't even the story that Greg sent. The story that Greg sent, a related one, he sent me Eric Lipton from the New York Times, Eric Lipton's tweet linked to this New York Times story. Extraordinary story, he says, of an attempt by 2 Persian Gulf monarchies, can you guess which they are, to influence U.S. foreign policy that reached right into the White House and the think tank industrial complex of D.C. It would be a full-blown scandal in any other era. You could probably guess that the 2 Persian Gulf monarchies are, of course, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. New angle on this, though. The picture illustrating the article entitled How 2 Gulf Monarchies Sought to Influence the White House is a photo of Donald Trump standing next to George Nader, whose name you now recognize these days, a political advisor to the de facto ruler of the UAE. This picture taken last year. Mr. Nader worked to turn a top Trump fundraiser into an instrument of influence at the White House for rulers of the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Now, we're running low on time, but let me skip 2 paragraphs down just to let you know, as our loyal correspondent has been telling us all along. Let me scroll back down a little bit to find the latest dispatch from Montreal girl, BJ Hutch, sending us the very same article. She has been sending me articles on Elliot Broidy consistently, some of which I understand and some of which I do not, but he is wrapped up in all of this. But just skipping down a couple of paragraphs in the New York Times piece. High on the agenda of the 2 men, George Nader, a political advisor to the de facto ruler of the UAE, and Elliot Broidy, a deputy finance chairman of the Republican National Committee, was pushing the White House to remove Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, backing confrontational approaches to Iran and Qatar, and repeatedly pressing the president to meet privately outside the White House with the leader of the UAE. Mr. Tillerson, of course, fired last week, and the president has adopted tough approaches toward both Iran and Qatar. Mr. Nader tempted the fundraiser, Mr. Broidy, with the prospect of more than $1 billion in contracts for his private security company, how do you pronounce this? Circinus, Circinus. We better learn how to pronounce that one. And he helped deliver deals worth more than $200 million with the UAE. He also flattered Mr. Broidy about how well you handle chairman, a reference to Mr. Trump, and repeated to his well-connected friend that he told the effective rulers of both Saudi Arabia and the UAE about the pivotal, indispensable, magical role you are playing to help them. That sounds like he's really put in a couple of good words here and there for them. Latest news, though, on Nader, if in case they ever wanted to actually get a hold of him and ask some more questions about this very, very strange role that he's playing in American politics. Too bad. He's gone. Did you know that he has absconded, fled the United States to points unknown, but I think he's on his way back to the UAE. And, man, if I can't find that article now, but I'll dig that up for you. How do you like that? The guy's gone. I have no idea whether I will be seeing him again, but I guess he's free from the clutches of Muller. That's a really dark twist on all of this. And by the way, alongside all of this, I did see news yesterday that the Saudi Crown Prince and the Trump administration have finalized one of their big old weapons deals, a $12.5 billion package. That rings some bells. Wasn't that like $110 billion when they returned from the official trip to Saudi Arabia all that time ago? And I guess it's shrunk down to $12.5 billion. Maybe it's a side deal. Maybe it's only part of it. There's a lot of craziness going on here. We'll return to these topics and much more tomorrow. And who knows what could happen next week. But man, absconding in the middle of all this?
From
Peter,
Daily Coos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David
Let's
Walton.
see what Justice has got for us here. Dr. Greg Dworkin asked that we be allowed to study the gun issue and follow the data. Just simply follow the data. That was 5 years ago, so maybe we can start now based on what's happening in this omnibus bill. Trump and his businesses are rife with conflicts of interest. This we know. The Republican Party is in on it, and Justice has more next.